Real talk, real impact, unfiltered and unapologetic. This is FemmeIcon.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. This is Mahvish Akhtar with another episode of FemmeIcon. And our today's topic is the future. And what kind of future are we talking about? Let's take a minute to let people join in and let's find out what kind of future we're talking about. What I wanted to do today was just kind of examine everything and put things in perspective. Walaikum assalam. Right, that's a very long name, so I'm just going to call you with that. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so I see some new names here. If you guys have any questions and starter questions, you can ask while we wait for some more people to join. You can ask. Just nothing too long, because we do want to cover a lot. We have to cover a lot, and I do want to get to that. To understand not understand our future, maybe even kind of, predict, or, that sounds really pretentious on my part. Just kind of trying to figure out what direction we might go in. I don't know. Not by we, I mean the world, and I mean generally. But it seems like we might be doing with our lives, with our world. We have to start with the past. That's the tricky thing. You can't talk about the future without talking about the past, because you know what the present is. Let's look at it. I'm sorry, my throat's a little bit scratchy today, because here is how it works. Your past has already happened, and we have a lot of information about it, especially now, because the internet gives us so much to work with, right? And this is books, newspapers, books, tons and tons of books, media. We have so much on our fingertips, how everything is connected, what happened, and then what do others think about it, and then it's just everything. So we have so much perspectives on every single issue, right? So we get to know so much about everything in the world, and we get to make up our own minds about it. We get to, just decide on our own. So the past matters in our daily lives as well, and in a global sense. Our present is to decide whatever happens now or is happening in the moment, is to decide, look, this is what happened in the past, or uski wajah se present mein ye ho raha hai. But the present comes and goes in the blink of an eye, right? So hum present ko kaise use karenge to make decisions ki hum future mein kya kar rahe. So the present is really just about past se learn karke abhi kya karna hai in the future. So future is going to shape our coming times, which will become our history, and then our future. So the present is really just about the past and the future. It's really just where we actually take the action. It's important. It's very important. But that's not where we're doing the actual learning. The actual learning is happening when we are looking at the past. I mean, of course, we're doing that in the present. But the actual learning process is happening when the incident is taken, because the incident takes place in the present, right? And in that moment, when we're learning about it, that becomes our past as well. So I don't know if that made any sense. But my point is, to get to the future, we have to learn about our past. So that's where we're starting. Our past. The world's past, basically. So it's really tricky. What I'm going to do right now is I'm not going to focus on our present. I'm hoping things will make sense to you without me actually pointing it out how they relate to our present. Some things I'll spell it out, but most things I'm not going to need to, because I'm going to think of you as our maybe having an understanding of how they relate. I'm not talking about with a personal past, because it probably isn't a good idea to do that when you're, talking about our emotions and our personal lives. I'm talking about more in the sense of our kind of collective past in terms of politics and bigger questions in life. But yeah, no, I wouldn't recommend that for personal life. Absolutely not. Do not do that for your personal life. That doesn't work out. And definitely we'll delve into this topic sometime as well. Okay, personal life में how to handle your past, how to handle trauma, your past trauma, and how to deal with it in a way कि आप उसको भी address करें past trauma को, और इस तरह भी ना हो कि आप बिल्कुल उसके अंदर you're just stuck inside of it. So I'm sure most of you know who Malcolm X was. He was a Muslim activist in the U.S. and he was an African American, and he basically was the man when in the U.S. they had this they had segregation in the sense that black people were not allowed to go in the restaurants that white people were in, were allowed to eat in or go in. The water fountains were separated, entrances were separated to the same place, and just extreme level of separation. And of course, he was an activist. He spoke a lot about this, did a lot for this cause. And it's interesting to note that at that time, or any time something like this is happening, some kind of oppression is taking place, the majority of the people think that it's okay. And the minority who's speaking up, of course, these people have, they may not be a minority in the sense of number of people, right? But the minority who's speaking up, who is oppressed, have to really work hard to make people understand a very basic concept that now we think back and we're just like, how is that okay? How are people thinking that this is something wrong? Right? Now we look back and that's what we would say. That is what we talk about now, that, people thought that this was okay to do. Even if people believe that at this point in life, that it wouldn't be okay on the whole to do something like that, you don't say it and you don't actually do it, right? That's what we would think. But that's what happened, people who worked maybe in even the same building, let's say, because I don't think that there was a thing, I don't know by that time how things were exactly, but whites and blacks who worked in the same building could not use the same bathroom. It was that bad. Sounds ridiculous at this time. But yeah, it happened. And it just wasn't really a thing that anybody noticed or said, hey, for other people, for the majority, for the oppressors, it was the regular, even now I'm not talking about governments right now, even the public, it was like, is that really a problem? Who is it bothering? What is it? How is it a big deal? The reason I mentioned him, just to give you some context on this, and he said, and I find this very interesting, and I'm sure that you will. Ooh. I'm sorry. I get dry mouth very easily. Okay. So, and I'm sure you'll relate and you'll understand why I picked him, why I picked this particular quote from him. If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. It's a very simple concept, right? That we didn't do anything, but we take such good care of them. We are so good to them. Look at what we give them. Look at what we're doing. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. But every other thing, जो कि गलत हो रही है, जो कि oppressive है, just that's not happening. Just ignore it or make something up. And everybody else will do the same. All the other powers, all the other people who matter will do the same. And he actually also said, I don't know the exact quote, so but the gist of it, I think he said something of the sort that media makes the culture, which is absolutely true. Media defines right now, whether it's social media or news media or the shows we watch or the kind of what messages are being conveyed in that is what defines how we think. That's what defines what a thought is. It doesn't matter what part of the world we're sitting in. That is what will define how we will behave, who we think is the good guy, who we think is the bad guy. Just generally, that is our thought process. I mean, as Muslims sitting in a Muslim country, I mean, I'm not even talking about the countries that are around the world, regardless of where you're sitting. I'm sitting in a Muslim country as a Muslim. If you put like 3 people in front of me, you don't have to ask me. 3 people in front of me, 2 are shaved men, let's say, 2 are shaved, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and 1, with a beard, and he's wearing some kind of garb that resembles a Muslim clothing, and ask me, there has been some kind of a terrorist event or something. Which one would you suspect did it? In my mind, where does it go? It shouldn't. All 3 of them could be Muslim, for all I know. Or the 3rd person that I described may not be. He may just be from one of the Muslim countries, and he might just be, that may be his culture, but not religion. So that's what we have learned it. I mean, if you're sitting in a Muslim country or in a non-Muslim country in some other part of the world, you may experience the same thing, or you may not. And if you don't, kudos to you. But that's how we think, because that's how we've been trained to think. That's not how we are born thinking. And if especially in a Muslim country, if we look around, everybody's dressed the way I'm describing this 3rd person. Most people have beards. Most people are either in, those long things or, a shalwar or shirt and whatever, shalwar or pajamas or whatever. Everybody's wearing those things. So why is our mind going there? So we are conditioned and we are always thinking about that. That's what comes to our head. I'm sorry, I keep kicking this thing in the bottom. So keeping on track and going back to the past and staying on the idea of how people perceive and how we perceive people and how we have learned different things about different people. Let's talk about Gandhi for a bit, because we're still talking about our past and how our past brought us to this point and what our future looks like. Keeping our past in mind. What do we know about Gandhi? Well, we sitting in Pakistan. No different about Gandhi, but around the world. He was a East living activist who did a lot for the country, and his demonstrations and his way of expressing himself was always peaceful. That's what we know. He did a lot for the caste system. He talked about the untouchables having to, a lot of that, right? And he spent a lot of his time, he lived there, not permanently, but years in South Africa. And I've heard and read a bit about the fact that he had some bad experiences with people, with white people specifically. There, he went there for some civil cases, and started up some cases of his own. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't know: that he was extremely racist. He's actually written about it in his own book, and he's Again, we're going into the past because we have to understand that there's a lot of things that get said and done that we don't hear about, and that shape how we are today, that shape how countries and people and big organizations survive with certain ideologies that get applied today, right? So Gandhi is a very important part of so many different cultures and so many different movements that are here. They're surviving, they're thriving actually, and those ideas are still there for them. So he used to write back to the firms that he worked for, which were British firms in India at that time, the subcontinent, and the things he would say about the Africans, the Black South Africans. He would call them savages, and just a lot of, I don't even really feel like repeating all those words. And actually what he had done was he actually started a case, a kind of whichever area he was in, a small tiny case with there was some place to have separate entrances for white people and Black people. And he put Indians in, guess which category? In the white people category. And he claimed that Indians are in white people category because we were, at that time, obviously, it was just like all one big place, that Indians were, what was it, Anglo? Aryan, Anglo, something like that. Do I have it somewhere? Yeah, Indo-Aryans. I'm sorry, I was saying it wrong. And so because he was saying that we come from the same kind of flow of blood, and Black people are just completely different. They're just like raw form of this. Nothing to do with us, of course. Nothing to do with white people and us. We're just like different human, pure human. And I'm sure the white people, British, laughed at that because brown people, us and them, haha, funny idea for them. So that was him, how he thought about just that. That's just one place that we're talking about. And then he had in his own book, his autobiography, he had a lot of ideas about how he wanted to present class, and he the levels that they have in their religion. He didn't really talk about equality in that sense. He talked about, of course, they shouldn't be untouchable and they should get their rights, because at any point over there in India, in their hierarchy, they believe in maintaining that caste system. They believe in maintaining that there should be a system. There should be a system where you keep people within their ranks, but within their ranks, they should get their rights. Like, these untouchables shouldn't be shunned, and they shouldn't be that they don't get their rights, or they don't get jobs or not be protected. But he never said, or maybe in the end he did start to say that a little bit because there was a lot of criticism for him. But he never said, in reality, in practice, that they should be equal to anyone else in the upper class. So he said, they should stay there, but they should be given rights according to where they belong, according to their caste. They should be left there. Their jobs shouldn't be that they get educated and get the same kind of job that somebody up there would be getting. So that's where he was at. They were called Bhangis, I guess, the lowest caste. In my opinion, actually, it was a derogatory term. The actual term is different. In my opinion, an ideal Bhangi should have a thorough knowledge of the principles of sanitation. He should know how a right kind of latrine, toilet, is constructed and the correct way of cleaning it. He should know how to overcome and destroy the odor of something I don't understand this word. I don't know. I think it's in Hindi. And the various, I guess he's talking about odor in the bathroom, and the various disinfectants to render them innocuous. So he's saying they should be given the jobs, they should be trained properly, but the jobs that are proper for them. And this is one of the jobs they should be doing. And in this book, again, he talks about women in autobiography. The condition of England at present is pitiable. I pray to God that India may never be in that plight. That which you consider to be the mother of parliaments is like a sterile woman and a prostitute. Both these are harsh terms, but exactly fit the case. That parliament has not yet, of its own accord, done a single good thing. Hence, I have compared it to a sterile woman. I mean, this is one of the quotes. You can find a ton of things that he said and done. I mean, I don't want to get into it because that's not what we're here to talk about. But I'm just taking things out of history to just talk about. I'm sorry, that how we have been misled. One thing is that whatever media tells us, we just tend to believe it as it. We don't have the we have the capacity to research for ourselves and look into what is true and what is not for ourselves. But usually we don't, because we tend to just believe in whatever we're being told. And if we question it, we are looked at as, why would you question that? Oh my gosh, you just hate everyone, or you have a problem with everyone, and it's because of this. And we don't want to be questioned. And the idea of what we have these days, we've always had that, but now it's more prevalent because of so much connection, so much backlash that we can get quickly because of social media. So what ends up happening is, the second you disagree with someone, doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter, you can say they're liberal, you can say they're, conservative, whatever, anybody, any kind of group, any kind of people, you disagree with them, and you're going to be quote unquote canceled. So, and that becomes a lot. That is, people don't want to upset anyone, especially the group that they identify with, right? You don't want to make anybody upset. You don't want to. So whenever we start a conversation, we have to start with a disclaimer. I just want to say, I condemn this and I condemn that, and now I'm going to start the real conversation, right? That's where we go. That's the first thing we do. That's the first thing we say. And I know that we see this a lot these days. Everybody who's starting a conversation is, well, I just want to say that I condemn the attacks on blah, 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 and I condemn this, and I am in favor of this, and then I'm going to. It's, why? Why do you have to qualify everything or justify everything? Why does it have to be that way? Why can't you just say what you need to say? And it's gotten ridiculous. Because, and we're still talking about the past, and it's bringing us, it seems like we're talking about today. Nothing is different. The people who are, literally, we're still, I'm reading that again and again in my mind, and you'll see how it applies even to this day, because I'm still going to be in the past, and you guys see that thing with Malcolm X, that if you're not careful, they're going to make you hate the oppressed, right? Because over here, this guy who we think is, oh my God, he's so wonderful, he's so great, he's done nothing wrong in his life. He's just peacefully, he has tried to lift people up. Here he is talking about every oppressed group, every person that he should have been protecting. He's talking down about them, and he's actually actively tried to keep them oppressed. So, but we can't say anything of this sort in public. This is not something that can be talked about openly. Even now, people are going to come up with, well, look, he's not all bad. I'm sure there were some good qualities about him. But do they outweigh these bad ones? Okay. And then let's come to somebody, just, somebody else who's really same example, a tiny bit more relatable. And not to personally to anybody, but like in general, same kind of situation, kind of, sort of, not really. Nelson Mandela. I'm sure most of us know that he was on the terrorist list, the US's terrorist list. Nobody talks about that now, because that's a shameful period in history ever. Also for those of us who lived through that, or some part of it that we caused, but for governments, because once he was not on that list, and I don't want to go into details of politics or whatever, because that's not the point, but once he was not on the list, and once everybody became, savvy to the idea of, oh, he's a hero, nobody talked about how, for the same things, he's a hero. He's a freedom, he became, symbol of freedom all of a sudden. And what happened, and we're not going to get into the politics of it, but I'm just going to explain to you what happened, because that will directly, and it's just kind of bring us back to right here, to today. Just, it's mind-boggling. I'm not, just, very short version of it. So what was happening was the same thing. We talked about South Africa. What was happening in South Africa was the same exact thing. There was apartheid and just oppression, extreme oppression, as we know, and the Black South Africans were peaceful protest, same way, trying really, really hard, and it wasn't working. It was just not working. Didn't work for a very, very long time. Eventually, there were some extreme cases of violence against the Black South Africans, and of course, Nelson Mandela, for a long time, did the whole peaceful thing, and then there came a time where it was just, after a lot of violence, incidents, then it was impossible to stay peaceful, and he was then. They took up arms, which is how it works usually. after peaceful protest. And then after a while, after years and years of bearing something like that, you just have to, when you have no choice and nobody else is doing anything for you and nobody else is helping you, what are you going to do? And that's what happened. And that was called guerrilla war and this and that. And oh my gosh, they're fighting. There are, terrorists, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they're, and yeah, he was a terrorist from that point on, because he decided to pick up arms against people who were oppressing his people after trying peacefully. Yeah, sounds familiar. But we can't still say that, because if we do, then that's not cool. That's not cool. So why can't we say that? Because we changed our minds about Nelson Mandela. Why did we change our minds about that? We can get into that. But that's irrelevant. Now, we can also get into this. But there's something else we don't understand about this whole situation. I actually do want to, before we move on from Nelson Mandela, actually we have moved on from Nelson Mandela, because we now understand how this works. You're a terrorist because they have decided it. You cannot stand up to somebody unless you are allowed to by the powers that be. Right? And we see that. You just can't, unless you're the bad guy. And it's because they said so, and then they're going to make sure that the media and everybody around them will push that agenda everywhere, right? And that's what happened. And nobody could speak up, because anybody who said, no, he's not a terrorist, he's a freedom fighter, what would be the answer? Oh my gosh, you are a terrorist sympathizer, you're an apologist for whatever they wanted to say. And what happens today? Anytime you say, well, these are freedom fighters, this happened because of this, and this, and it's like, how would you say that? They're murder and killing and this and that, and you just don't want to. But how could you not condemn? How could you not condemn? And we'll get to that in detail in just a minute. Not in too much detail, but in detail in just a minute. I know we haven't talked about the future, but we've gotten just to the present, right? So let's bear with me just a moment. Okay. So, the present. We're in the present. Welcome. So, this is a memo that went out to the New York Times reporters from the higher-ups and the editors and whatnot. The Intercept reported this, and this is about the memo. It leaked somehow. The memo reads, written by Times Standards editor Susan Westling, international editor Philip Pan, and their deputies. It starts here now. Offers guidance about some terms and other issues we have grappled with since the start of the conflict in October. While the document is presented as an outline for maintaining objective journalistic principles in reporting on the Gaza war, several Times staffers told The Intercept that some of its contents show evidence of the paper's deference to Israeli narratives. When possible, avoid the term and be specific. For example, Gaza, the West Bank, as each has a slightly different status. be specific, not just put Gaza and West Bank. Don't bunch them up together. The nature of the conflict has led to inflammatory language and incendiary accusations on all sides. We should be very cautious about using such language, even in quotations. Even if somebody said it, that's what quotation means. If you're quoting someone, even if they said it, take it out. I guess that means our goal is to provide clear, accurate information, and heated language can often obscure rather than clarify the fact. Words like slaughter, massacre, and carnage often convey more emotion than information. Think hard before using them in our own voice. It is accurate to use terrorism and terrorists in describing the attacks of October 7th, which included the deliberate targeting of civilians and killings and kidnappings. That is actually inaccurate because there was no deliberate killing of civilians. Kidnapping, can't be sure if, the intention. Actually, there was a memo. I could not find it for this session, but there was a memo by Hamas, a couple of months after the event, the October 7th event happened. I call it an event like it was, gala or something. No, that's not the right word. The tragedy of October 7th happened. In that they had explained what happened exactly, and they said the intention was to only attack Israeli army and soldiers and their, whatever their stations were, but things went wrong, and they admitted that they made mistakes as well. And we know that it's been proven. People, news outlets and everybody has said that they started shooting their own civilians, and in the chaos, they took civilian hostages, but the killing only took place from the Israeli side. So yeah, the hostage taking, of course, happened for sure. Should not have happened, but the killing was not. And if there was any killing of civilians, it was not deliberate from Hamas's side. So that, and I will definitely, I read it, but at that time I did not save it, and then after that it just kind of disappeared from anywhere that I can, but I'll try to get it. So yeah. So in this part, even if it was true, let's just assume that it's all true, but even in this part, you mention it, deliberate killing of civilians and taking hostages, but there's no mention of the other side, the atrocities from the other side. There's no, like, how do you define that? But then if you are defining that in any way, if you are discussing it, don't use the words carnage or massacre. Okay. We should not shy away from the description of the events or the attackers, particularly when we provide context and explanation. So give as much detail of that as you can. Avoid fighters when referring to the October 7th attacks. The term suggests a conventional war rather than a deliberate attack on civilians. And be cautious in using militants, which is interpreted in different ways and may be confusing to readers. Meaning they might just think that they were fighting for a purpose, right? And we don't want that. We don't want them to think that they might have a reason for doing what they did. Issuing guidance like this to ensure accuracy, consistency, and nuance in how we cover the news and standard practice across all our reporting, including complex events like this. We take care to ensure our language choices are sensitive, current, and clear to our audience. Charlie Standler, New York Times spokesperson. So they have been advised, guided to make sure that their language is clear in making sure that the October 7th, the perpetrators of October 7th are shown as the criminals, the evil bad guys of this whole thing. This would have never happened if they hadn't done what they did.